Boom. We're back.
We seem to be.
We seem to be. The one and only armchair attorney, Mr. Matthew Leffler, is coming back here today to, Matt is like the chief legal correspondent for the Freight Coach because he's the one who can say, hey, dumbass, no, that's not actually what that means. And that's why I had to have him come back on.
I am happy to be your armchair attorney. And whatever value I can add to the supply chain and talking law, that's a good thing. So thanks for having me on.
And as we always say, do not take legal advice from a show.
This is not intended for legal advice. This is not establish an attorney-client relationship. Do not take legal advice from a television show. That's a bad idea. If you think you need a lawyer, hire a lawyer.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. But hey, before we kind of start out, I have to talk about my friends over at BidFreighter. They are the preferred EDI partner over here at the Freight Coach. They help keep the Freight Coach's lights on and bring this content out every single week to you guys. The guys at BidFreighter are on a mission to connect the logistics industry with a flat fee for unlimited EDI messaging. Carriers and owner-operators alike, you are costing yourself business by not having a digital option to accept tenders from your customers. With the Load Accept platform, EDI is no longer an expensive and unattainable option for companies who may not have a legacy TMS to utilize for your day-to-day operations. Load Accept levels the playing field for your organization and makes EDI compliant for you and your customers through automation. If your customers are requiring you to have EDI capabilities, you now have a seamless and effective tool to utilize in Load Accept. If you're ready to learn more, visit www.bitfreighter.com to request a Load Accept demo today. Just do me a favor, let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. They're great guys over there. I'm all about fighting for the little guy in this industry. And, they're up and coming, Matt. And, it's great to see, it's great to see all these companies coming out, technology and everything else. And these guys are from the industry too. I will always stand behind those tech companies that came up in the industry and have done the job.
I don't see how anyone would want to change from an AS400 based platform. So it sounds like this innovation's an inevitability. So great that they're able to sponsor this program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we got some hot button issues to talk about today, man. There's been a lot of stuff in the news. I just want to start this out and say this. I want to be abundantly clear. Chris Jolly stands with the drivers of Canada. I fully stand with their right to do exactly what they're doing. As the son of a truck driver, as somebody who has been in this industry my entire life, I believe in everyone having the freedom and autonomy to do what they want, to make a living. I stand with freedom. I stand with liberty, and everybody's right to that. I do not feel the need to kind of skirt around these issues anymore. I'm going to come out and blatantly say that. I understand that there's a lot of hot button issues that are happening. I understand that a lot of this stuff has caused some division out there. I understand if you don't share the same viewpoint that I do on some of these issues that we're going to be discussing today. And I respect the fact that you don't want to engage with that. But here's what I want. I want you to have the right to do and say what you feel is best for you and your family. That's all I'm going to say on that. But let's dive in, Matt. I mean, do you have anything like you got something to say?
Yeah, let me just say, trucking is one of the hardest professions in the world, one of the most dangerous professions in the world. And anything that we do that makes driving a truck more difficult is something we should be very careful about doing. Because at the end of the day, everything that you have in your home comes on a truck. It gets there by some method of delivery, whether it goes to a retail store or to your porch or to your doorstep. So everything that we talk about today, I don't have strong opinions on a lot of different things, but I'm excited to dive into these different topics. But to your point, this is something we have to understand. Why do not people want to not be truck drivers anymore? Well, a lot of this has to do with the regulatory framework that truck drivers have to deal with, whether it's mandates of vaccinations or other types of hours of service things. So at the end of the day, I'm with you. I love the truck drivers. I love the mechanics. I love the brokers and the dock workers. We want these people to have great, safe jobs. And there's a lot of stuff we can talk about today.
No, absolutely. So there has been, this was as of 10 minutes ago, there was some stuff going on last night that like Facebook shut down their page.
Are you frozen or am I frozen?
Out there, which that happened when we're there we go. It's funny how that happened when we're talking
I was
about
terrified
this.
For a moment.
I know. But no, they're out there. Freedom Convoy 2022. It's back up and running on Facebook. Go out there and support them if you believe in that. Same with their GoFundMe page. There was some stuff breaking overnight that GoFundMe had froze the account. And I understand the initial uproar behind it, but at the same time, I understand why GoFundMe did it, because the dollar amount that it's up to as of 10 minutes ago is $5.4 million Canadian, 4.3 million US is in this account right now. So I understand why they want to have a breakdown of how the funds would be distributed, because at the end of the day, they're on the hook for that amount. If that somehow, I'm not saying that it is, but if that somehow comes out to be fraudulent under any way, shape, or form.
Well, the thing to keep in mind in this case with the raising of the funds, it just goes to show how passionate people are about this issue and the impact that it has with the delivery of goods across North America. So whatever ends up happening with this thing, what everyone who's watching now can understand is this is a very important topic that has a lot of people very, very closely watching it.
No, definitely. And, so I want to jump. Obviously, the Supreme Court shot down the OSHA 100-person thing a couple weeks back there. And I want to know, because like my initial thought was, that came out, and then like the following day or two, they were like, hey, we're still shutting down the border to unvaccinated drivers. So I want to talk about, like, I understand the lawsuit that was brought to the Supreme Court and heard by the Supreme Court was the 100-person company.
Yeah.
Why, after hearing that though, would they still implement that at the border?
Well, let's start off with talking a little bit about the case with
Yeah.
OSHA specifically. So the way that the administration wanted to force this mandate, and again, they would say, well, it's a mandate to either have testing or to have a vaccination. Those are your two paths. But the reality was the mechanism was through OSHA. OSHA is a regulatory agency that really focuses on the health of the workplace and the workers that are involved. And OSHA, like every federal agency, is a creature of statute. What that means is Congress says, here's the authority we're going to give you to go do this thing. And then the federal government, when it goes to the executive branch, they are the ones that go out there and put out these rules and enforce what these rules are. The challenge that ultimately succeeded was OSHA doesn't have this authority. OSHA has no authority to do this. And we were talking about an example of this in another conversation, but I'll give you an example. Let's say your daughter gets a job at a retail store or a restaurant, and she says, well, I'm so excited to start, but I have to get a vaccination. You go, well, what vaccination do you want to get? Well, I have to get the HPV vaccination. The question you'd ask is, well, why does OSHA care about you getting an HPV vaccination? Well, it might prevent cervical cancer. This whole rationale behind OSHA's decision, in this case, to push this rule in the first place, was that this COVID-19 affects everybody. It affects them at work and at home, and it's very transmissible. And so they said, well, the safest thing to do is let our agency handle this. And the Supreme Court said, no, you don't. No, you don't. And as any good American should understand, is when government tries to execute authority that they don't have, we have to stop them. We have to hold them accountable, because when an administrative agency or any part of the federal government gets a piece of power, they don't give it back up. They don't give it back. So when you think about the OSHA mandate and the Supreme Court that decided this, they basically walk through what OSHA had done in the past and what things they have the ability to actually regulate. And it's not this forced vaccination. Now, the counterpart to this, what you talked about with this crossing of the border, non-citizens don't really have constitutional rights. Their ability to come into the country is at the pleasure, generally speaking, of the government of the United States. So whatever rights we have as individuals, as citizens of the US government, those are not the same rights that the Canadian truck drivers have. So if the United States decides that they want to force a mandate, they absolutely can force a mandate.
Okay.
Again, might not be grounded in science or fact in terms of why they want it, but they certainly have the power.
No, again, and that is what needs to be said, Matt, because that is some stuff that's kind of lost in the noise out there of our friends in mainstream media. There's always an alternative to that, it seems, right now. Let's jump into the comments. We're kind of already got some going out there. My friend Tim Breckenridge got my popcorn ready. What's up, Tim? Scott, I always mess this up because I talk too fast. As a male, my brain works faster than my mouth does sometimes. So I'm reading it. I'll admit it. My wife's probably, well, she's not watching right now, but anyways, she'll agree with that statement. The Freight Sensei, Watanabe, Scott Watanabe, the Freight Sensei, coming to us up from Boise, Idaho. And then my friend Nerfod, what's going on? He's our brother up in Canada, up there. And, here's what he says. I'm going to read this because to put it in context. He lives 8 miles from the border, the biggest border ambassador bridge. Let me tell you something. It's bad for vax drivers right now as well. They need to wait in long lines to get confirmation from U.S. Customs and Canadian Customs that they are vaxxed and that their proof is legitimate. last night had 4 loads wait over 3 hours at the border and lined across just because CBP, Canadian Border Patrol and USA decided the checkpoint for proof of vaccination. It's going to cause huge delays even for the vaxxed. He said, let's scrap it and get these economies going. And the fallout from these restrictions and mandates is far worse than the virus itself. I don't disagree with him. I feel like at this point, because here's my initial thought, Matt. Like, Canada's our biggest trade partner. That is, very few people know that. Canada is the United States' biggest trade partner that's out there. Everything that's going on with the ports right now in Los Angeles, backups, 100 ships. The ships are still backed up regardless. I know that, after they put their little pieces out there, they've walked away from that.
That got solved.
I know, exactly. Our friend that, Secretary of Transportation went out there, did their, things. And I get it. I get how the government works. This isn't a knock on anybody. They're just doing what they're told to do. But with all of that going on, why would we, especially with all the information that we know now, this is what I don't understand on having this happen, because, why are we prohibiting and limiting any goods from entering our country right now when our store shelves are not, like, it's not as bare as some people post out there where every single store empty. There is limited selections compared to what we're used to. I don't like my initial thought process is, why would we be doing this to stop goods from coming into our country and even going into Canada? Why would that happen?
This is a great question. So, at the end of the day, this shrinks capacity. It causes delays and result in things costing more. That's what happens when you shrink capacity. I think that one of the problems we run into is we don't take into account things like natural immunity. If you've been sick by COVID before, you have some level of protection that is similar or comparable to having the vaccinations. Public policy around these issues, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm a juris doctor, I'm a pretend doctor. But what I would say is that it's just bad public policy. In order to put people in place to say you need to have this vaccination to come into our country, makes it really nonsensical to me. And we will find, I think, that if we don't change this thing, the cost of moving goods into Canada or from Canada and the United States will cost more. And that's what's going to happen. And people will fight back, and they'll talk to their politicians or elected officials and say, hey, I don't want this. I want this not to be something the U.S. government does. And this is some chance for people to have some citizen advocacy. If you don't like this, contact your representative, contact your senator and tell them, I don't want this mandate because it doesn't help us protect our own population. And it clearly doesn't help us keep the cost of goods from rising.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you said, I'm not a doctor, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I could be one. I'm kidding. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but most of you guys out there know the joke from that commercial back in the day, which was genius marketing, by the way, because that let all that out there. And then, also I found another thing that I haven't seen anybody in, should I call them the MCM? If I say mainstream media, like, nobody can come after me, right?
You call them whatever you like. I'm just happy to be here for the conversation.
Exactly. So this is what's not being reported out there. This is from a member that I follow is of the convoy that's out there that I follow on social media, that they want it to be abundantly clear that they're not anti-vaccination. It's anti-government mandates. Many of us are vaccinated. We simply believe that every Canadian should be free to choose and face no discrimination or restrictions for the freedom due to their choice. And it's one of those situations that also they put out there, because I think that there was some false reporting out there that the truckers will not block emergency vehicles at any point ever, and will assist any person in need at any point in the convoy or protest. Safety plans are in place. Drivers have been briefed and signed documents at their respective checkpoints. So, that's another thing too, is it's like, making sure that the whole story's told, because, that's the thing is, Matt, is, I'm a big history fan. I know we've talked history before, and unfortunately history is written by the person who won. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth, so it's like putting the whole, what do they say? Tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. What's that thing that, I've never been to court.
when you swear on the Bible or whatever book you swear on when you go to be on the jury stand or you're being a witness. Exactly. Well, here's what I would say on that piece. One of the things that I find really discouraging is how interested other companies or individuals and governments are on your medical history. So I'm a big fan of keeping what you can keep private and not putting everything out into the world where any piece of data is knowable about you for all time. And this idea that not just employers want to know information about your medical history, but your insurers and your government. And it just begins this path of, once you feel comfortable giving up that right, you don't get it back. You don't undo this thing. I look at the parallel when we were young men with 9/11 and the authorization to use military force and the Patriot Act and these things that came on that drastically shrank civil liberties in ways we didn't anticipate because it was during a crisis. And when there's always a crisis, there's people who want to use that crisis to achieve some political end. And I think your comments about the drivers who are part of the convoy up there are very well taken. Many of them may have been vaccinated. Many of them may have already gotten COVID to begin with. At the end of the day, everyone will get Omicron. This is one of the most virulent diseases I have ever encountered. And again, I'm not a medical doctor, but talking to my medical doctor friends, this is a very, very, very contagious disease. And it seems to be, whether you're vaccinated or not, you still get it. The ultimate piece of this is that if the vaccination is the way to protect yourself, it might not actually be the case. Again, I'm very much in favor of people having individual choice in doing the things that are good for their health. I just don't like someone else telling me what I have to do.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. J. Doc Brown's in the comments, also from Canada, 15 miles from the Buffalo Peace Bridge. Same wait times as well of the 3 hours. Kyle McNaught, what's up, Kyle? He's out there in Massachusetts. I'm sorry if I wasn't supposed to. Yeah, your information's put out there on LinkedIn. You put a city on there, I hope. He says, so my question is, what are the better? What's the better option if it's bad policy? Kyle, can you drop for further context? Is that in regards to the unvaccinated being able to cross the border or not? I just want to make sure that we can answer that properly.
What I would, to kind of give some context, what I think would be interesting is what public policy I would like to see taken into account is actual natural immunity from people who've gotten COVID. People who have gotten vaxxed or gotten boosted are still getting this disease, and it's fairly mild symptoms. And the same problem with comorbidities, whether you're overweight or really old, are still challenging. But these are things that should not be taken isolated. So having vaccinations as for having been infected. But other than that, I mean, how many touch points does a driver have in Canada coming to the United States? Probably not more than a normal United States driver. And just like we saw with OSHA getting knocked down by the Supreme Court, I don't think this makes good public policy sense. It will continue to spread. There is nothing that you can do other than wearing a mask, washing your hands, and being reasonable with what your interactions with other people are. So that would be, I would answer without further context. That's how I would address that question.
Okay. And that might have been what he was getting at with it as well. Again, I don't know. I don't like speaking for people. I try not to do that. I try and let, people put their own things out there. So no, I mean, I think that might be something that I know in my experience in moving cross-border freight, trucks in Canada, unless they have U.S. authority, when they come into the United States, they can only drop at one facility and pick up at another to go back to Canada. The load has to go directly back. Unless they have U.S. authority, then they can do multiple drops. But I know a lot of drivers didn't like doing that in my experience with cross-border freight. I know the same thing with loads going into Canada as well. U.S.-based carriers who would go in there could only drop at their delivery, pick up one load that was bound for the United States. They couldn't do multiple drops up there unless they had the authority to do so.
I think that you've hit it directly on the head here. Is that what level of virulence will be pushed out if someone comes without having a vaccination? Well, they could already have Omicron. They could be passing it no matter what. So the practical effect of these policies, again, in my opinion, is shrinking capacity. If you shrink capacity, everything goes up in terms of the cost of goods. So if a bunch of cohorts of drivers can't come to the United States for whatever reason, then you have a group of drivers who are much smaller than they were before. And that smaller group of drivers will raise the rates for everything.
No, for sure. And I think that we're seeing that kind of right now in our own stores in the United States is that you go out there and prices are higher. And that has a lot to do with rates that have been up. Rates are up historically. It's historic highs in OTR transportation right now. And LTL, there's a SIA just released that they're doing a 7.5% rate increase across the board and everything else. So it's like, that is going to hit us. And that's what it is it's like, again, the cost of goods that are rising out there. I mean, if you can't afford to feed your family, what are you going to do at that point?
You're exactly right. I mean, at this stage, you want to increase capacity. Part of the stuff we'll be talking about in a little bit about the 18-year-old drivers over interstate is, again, about alleviating this capacity crunch that we have. And if you're able to reduce capacity, you're going to make things more expensive. So these mandates and these actions don't make a ton of sense if you're trying to keep the capacity open.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely understand. And Annie Layer, she just dropped in there. Fallout from the restrictions is worse than death. COVID is death. I'm not getting why this mandate protecting you and others from the threat of death and disability is being fought so hard. Did you fight the polio vaccine mandate? Did you fight the diphtheria vaccine mandate? Those mandates save your life or the lives of people you know. I'm just shaking my head at people who think the mandate is not in their best interest.
That's a great question. I mean, my grandfather had polio and he was paralyzed from the waist down. My father had measles and mumps, and he would say that's some of the most painful things he'd ever experienced. I will say this on the vaccination. This vaccination is really designed to do two specific things: prevent death that's related to COVID, whether it's a comorbidity that accelerates this, or to reduce the amount of hospitalizations. So these are the two things, because hospitalizations require resources to be allocated. These vaccines do not stop you from getting the virus. They do not stop you from getting sick. They don't stop you from transmitting it. It's not the same as we've seen with other types of vaccines that can stop a disease in its tracks. This disease moves fast. It evolves quickly. I am vaccinated. I encourage everybody to get vaccinated. But what I look at in terms of a mandate is this is a different type of mandate that is basically stopping you from coming into a country without the ability to say you're not going to push this disease to other people. If you took natural immunity as a piece of this calculus, I think you'd have a much broader acceptance of what people are trying to do. But at the end of the day, there's a group of people that don't want to be told by the government what to do. And they have the right, in the United States at least, to say no to that. That's why OSHA was the vehicle they tried to use to push this mandate to begin with, and it wasn't effective.
Yeah. And again, it's a failure on my part. I should have done more research in regards to some of these other vaccine mandates in the history. But to the best of my knowledge, they were never put in place that prohibited people from moving about freely or buying food without showing proof.
Let me give you some example. I mean, just to push back a little bit. So when we talk about the coercive power of government, the power of the government to make you do something, the government can say, hey, Matt, Chris, you're going to go die in a war. And you can't say, I don't want to do that. You don't have that right. They have the power to do enormous things. The government has pushed mandated vaccines in the past. When they do that, though, it is generally expressly done by Congress, which has then gone to the executive branch, who signs off of it and executes it. The state governments have the ability in many contexts to make mandates. So what we see in this case with the Supreme Court decision was an administrative agency outside of its depth trying to regulate something. I'll give an example what might be helpful for some of the viewers. So the problem with COVID is not the disease necessarily by itself, it's the comorbidities. And those comorbidities are a nice PC way of saying your age and your weight. Those two things determine a lot about how you receive and how you deal with COVID. Well, what if OSHA said, instead of mandating a vaccination, that they're going to say only a certain group of people of a certain age can work anymore? If you're old, it's just too dangerous to have you work. Or if OSHA said, hey, you know what? Let's make sure everybody loses 20 pounds. So we're going to start monitoring through OSHA your weight every week. No one wants that. And in the Supreme Court decision, they even came out and explained there's other ways you can do this. If this mandate is as important as people believe that it is, you can go to the Congress and have them pass a law. You can go to the state government and have them pass a local one. Or what we see right now is businesses get to do it. A business is a perfectly privately held organization that can make the rules about whether you work with them or not. So we have these alternatives. And the way I always look at this is whatever you can get the outcome that you like that does not require the federal government to exact you to do something. I prefer that. I prefer when the federal government isn't the one telling me to do something, that it's an employer or a state government or something else.
Because I feel like at that point, Matt, is the decision of the business and the individual to purchase or work for a company, whether, like whatever that they stand for at that point. And that's what I want to happen. I want it to be on the people to choose what they see best. If you're an organization out there and that's what you want to roll with, you roll with that. I want you to have the ability to do that, because to me, it's not about this mandate that they're trying to push. It's the next one and the one after that and the one after that. Because if you read throughout history, historically speaking, we all know what happens when you give an inch. People like to take a mile. And especially when it comes to power. And, it's well documented. I don't need to go into any specific examples, but there's been many, many wars fought about this.
And what I would say, like, for Andy's purposes, I'm on your side. Like, I believe in mandates. I just as an individual, I love the coercive power of government. I love when people have the rights to do these things. And so with the United States government saying to Canada, we're not going to allow your drivers in without proof of vaccination, that is the government's ability to do that. I don't know if it's a good public policy decision, but they clearly have the right to do that. And in the Supreme Court case we talked about, again, there's ways for the federal government to make a mandate. And if they do, I would comply with it because I follow the laws that are out there. So at least with the OSHA mandate.
Of course you do. You're an attorney, man. You have to do that. But here's the thing, though.
I don't believe in fundamental rights. I believe in constitutional rights. Brian Colt was my constitutional law professor. I would always say constitutional rights, not individual rights.
Yeah, but the thing I do like about attorneys is they find that gray area that makes all of a sudden that law invalid.
It's always gray.
We think, all right, we have Nicole Mitchell out there. My thoughts here: flights and travel, they have a plan. Why can't we look at policy airlines are using? And it's true. And she also says government is not concerned about capacity. This will promote and expedite the autonomous truck. That's a great correlation there, Nicole, because, thing is with the current administration, I mean, it's well documented. Obviously, the Democrats are all about clean energy. I want to breathe clean air too. Like, I think we all can say, I would love to have cleaner air to breathe. But yeah, that's the thing. And it's like, you see the rise of, electric vehicles and everything else. And, I don't believe in, like, I don't want to sound like I should have brought a tinfoil hat today, Matt. Excuse me. But no, go ahead.
You're exactly, well, here's what I'll say. We know what the future is. The future is autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. And when we talk about the biggest costs in trucking, there's two ones that everyone knows about. Fuel is the biggest cost, and the second biggest cost is labor. So these two costs are, let's say, 60% of the total cost of operating a commercial vehicle. These things will be changed. And COVID, if it has done anything, it has become the great accelerator of the trends and forces that we already see every single day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. Michael Magill, he says, I would love to see you speak about, quote unquote, where the virus came from. That is not the topic for this conversation today. Kathy Smith, she is out there. If we lose our voice on these mandates, on what goes into our own bodies, where will they draw the line with the next situations? Again, can't argue with that one. Kyle McNaught back out there. Should ask to borrow Bane's tinfoil. Sorry, we're inside joke. Bane and I are out there. Yeah, we do that on another show that we talk on all the time, as we always say about the tinfoil hat theories and everything else. That's an inside joke. Nicole Mitchell out there. Don't forget insurance and operating a truck. That's true.
That's about 4% of the cost. So if you break it down the numbers, fuel is anywhere from between 40 and 50%. Labor is like between 17 and 20%. Then your asset is your next expense. Then your maintenance is about 10%. Insurance is about 4% or so. These are all these really interesting numbers. Cost of trucking, very interesting.
No, definitely. John Radvansky, what's going on, John? He's out there opening up a can of worms. I love when somebody drops opening up a can of worms as the first sentence in their comment. Hilarious.
I like John. He's a good guy.
I know. John's great. But many who speak about personal responsibility do not really care if their personal responsibility has a negative effect on others or the healthcare system. Here's what I'll say.
Me and my wife, we disagree about certain things. And one of the main reasons I got vaccinated was my mother was fighting breast cancer. And I know, generally speaking, I'm 36, soon to be 37, generally healthy. I probably wouldn't have a bad outcome. But my biggest worry was transmitting something to somebody who was more vulnerable. And I take that really, really heavily, because the biggest question everyone should ask themselves, whether it's about viruses or not, is what is the duty you owe to others? And in my mind, if I could even think that I could cause someone to be have some bad outcome, it terrifies me. I didn't want to have to think about that. So that's why I ended up getting vaccinated on my own side. But I think that's a great question, is what duty do you owe to others? And is it something that should change the way you behave with your own body? That's an individual question, but it's a complicated answer.
Because here's the thing. As someone who has had COVID, I took it upon myself. Like, it's just like with anything. If I'm sick, I'm not going to go. I don't want, like, I share that same sentiment. I don't want to be responsible for somebody else getting sick or hurt from it. And I think, like, taking the personal responsibility upon myself to make that decision, I don't need Big Brother telling me stay home. That's all. That's my opinion on the matter. I'm an adult. I'm a responsible adult. And I know that there's going to be people who are like, but what about the others? That's a small subsector of the society. We could make that argument about so many hot button issues.
Oh, what about the 18-year-old drivers?
Absolutely. Oh, exactly. And, we got to, Jesus, it's already 11:30. We got to, we kind of went going there, but we can go a little bit over again. Like I always say, fuck it. It's my show. Right. Dave Crowder, he's out there. There are other ways to work and treat and prevent COVID that the government has basically forbidden to use. That has been the issue that nobody talks about. Can't argue the fact that that has only been one treatment option that's out there.
I have a doctor friend of mine who actually, if the medical industry right now and some of the regulatory bodies of practitioners, if you prescribe certain types of treatments, I'm not going to talk about those specific treatments here, but you get a call from the board and they say, why are you doing this? And they are inserting themselves in the patient relationships in ways that many doctors are not a big fan of. So the Pfizer pill coming out, these different types of treatments, and the fact that Omicron seems to be less deadly and less dangerous for hospitalizations, it really kind of puts a nail in the coffin of mandated vaccines as being effective to make society safer.
No, I agree. Michael Magill, on a serious note, it's scientifically proven that natural immunity is safer and better. Again, we're not here to talk about the science of that, but the CDC itself did recently come out and talk about the effectiveness of natural immunity. We could talk about this for 7 hours. I'm sorry. We gotta jump ahead because we got some other awesome things to talk about today too. And we're going to shift focus today to another hot issue that was released. And that is the ability for an 18-year-old to cross state lines now. As many of us in the industry know, 18 years old, you can get a CDL, but you had to only run intra-state at that point. You could only drive in the state of Texas. Now, with what is being released out there, we are good to go. But here's what I love about this, Matt, and because I'm a fan of training. I am a fan of implementing a process and everything else. Probably because I'm OCD. It's probably because I have ADD, ADHD, and everything else. That's probably the case, but I love following processes and procedures. So with this new program being released, this is an article that's out there. Let's see. My boy, Chris Spear, the CEO of the ATA. I love Chris Spear. He is an absolute badass. He was phenomenal. He was on the podcast. Go listen to that episode of Coffee with the Freight Coach. He's a phenomenal representative for the ATA. And I also have spoken to numerous other individuals that are associated with the ATA that was lobbying for this. Let's see, the program is, it's going to be implemented. I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me get this out here.
I can read you what it means. I have all the numbers and what the new training is requiring.
Okay, you go for it, because I have a very hard time reading and talking at the same time. Again, I'm a male. What do you do?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Let's talk about where we were. Let's talk about where we're going. So where we were, to your point earlier, was 18-year-olds in 49 states in the District of Columbia could operate a commercial vehicle, 80,000 pounds when it's fully loaded, on intrastate, within the state. That had been for many years pushed that maybe a driver should be able to do interstate. And the example people often give me, Chris, is, hey, I can drive from Chicago to Carbondale, but I can't drive from Chicago to Kenosha because that's interstate. And that's a really compelling argument that I honestly do not buy for a moment. But here's what the Cdl program is. So today, to get a CDL, it's about 160 hours. That's the minimum. It's 4 weeks. So 4 weeks of training, you get to drive a CDL. This new program that's going to be allowed for young people to operate commercial vehicles interstate requires an additional 120 hours, 3 additional weeks. And 3 weeks, I suppose, makes all the difference. Now, they're not trained in mountain driving. They're not trained in night driving. They are just doing some additional training for 3 weeks. After that 3 weeks, they have another 280 hours as an apprenticeship. So 7 more weeks. So this program gives you 10 additional weeks of operating an 80,000 pound machine with air brakes in all sorts of environments, because interstate does not mean you're going from Chicago to Kenosha. Interstate means you're going to Long Beach and then you're going to go to Atlanta. This is the difference of interstate transportation versus intrastate transportation. There's another caveat here, and that another caveat is if you're under the age of 19 to 20, but you have 1 year holding a CDL and 25,000 hours traveled in intrastate, you can also be able to drive interstate. The rationale behind this has always been there's a capacity crunch. Not enough drivers. And if we can get some young people to come into the profession, they would be really happy to do it. Now, I'm going to rant for a moment because if you want to be in transportation, you can drive a spotting truck. You can drive at an LTL terminal doing intrastate transportation. There's no doubt in my mind that if you're under the age of 21 and you just want to be in this industry, and you should, it's an awesome industry. There are ways to get in there without having to be an interstate truck driver. What concerns me is what we saw with that 23-year-old at the time of his accident, losing control of his truck and killing a bunch of people. We talked about insurance.
We did.
And insurance is important, but the mandated amount is not enough to cover the life of a human being. I'm sorry, I'll stop ranting for a minute.
No, that's fine. But here's my counter argument. State of Texas, state of California, intrastate. Across those great states is a distance of 800 miles. So a driver could hypothetically pick up in El Paso, Texas, and go about 80 miles southeast of McAllen, and it's an 820-mile transit. What is the difference between that 820 miles and, say, Dallas, Texas, going up to Des Moines, Iowa, which is roughly 800 miles?
Here's the argument that I would say against that. And taking that into account, I think that's right. If you're intrastate in Texas, you are driving a whole lot of distances. And there are tons of data points around the way teens operate vehicles and the danger of that, but we won't talk about that. If you have an accident as an intrastate truck driver in Texas, that's Texas's problem. That's a Texas issue. Texas has to realize how will they train drivers to operate effectively in their state. But let's look at the Colorado example. You drive from Houston and you go to Colorado and you kill somebody in a big accident, that's no longer just Texas's problem. That's an operator who is trained in one place and is now causing damages in some other place. And again, the states don't want this. They didn't beg for this to happen. This is governed mostly by the industry pushing to have young drivers on. And again, this program is designed to understand the risks of young drivers. It's not a forever thing at this moment.
No, definitely. The Freight Sensei's got a great point. And this is a sentiment that I feel as well. If they can go and volunteer to fight for our country and learn these same skills, my father, that's where he learned how to drive a truck. He served in the military and he was a truck driver. And that's how he got his start. With the additional training and guidance, again, why couldn't this be a good thing? And that's my sentiment with this is with the right, because I think like this is a starting point. I think, again, all of these things coming out with this is the initial framework of how this is going to evolve. Because, what they did talk about there is the truck that you will be trained in has advanced safety features. It has cameras. And as a business, if I owned a truck, I know I can see it. If I owned a truck, I would want as many safety features on my vehicles as well. And because, like that thing, what's that, nuclear verdict?
Yeah,
those are fucking rampant right now. And that is destroying small businesses. But beside the point, counter argue, like everything else, my thing is, this is the framework that is needed to get people involved in our industry early and to train them up there. Like this is like you're talking about. Here's what my honest opinion, the fact that you only need 160 hours, it doesn't like if you're 25 years old, 160 hours is pathetic.
Absolutely.
That should be increased. There should be an apprenticeship. It's just like, and I've used this example as well with the airlines, Matt. They're coming in, and I know, I know your opinion on the fucking safety, everything else, blah, blah, blah. I want to see more of an emphasis on more training, mountain training, night driving training. That is how we're going to attract better candidates. And that, what I think is going to help raise the safety standards of the industry. I think that's going to help raise the driver pay because they're more qualified at that point. And you have more of an opportunity to improve your skills in that apprentice. Like you go out there to be an electrician. I don't know the hours. You go out there to be a plumber. Guess what? You're an apprentice. you're an apprentice for, maybe a couple years. Again, don't hold me to that. I try not to use blanket statements. I'm sorry. But my thing is an apprenticeship style program where it trains them up. I think that the hours that they had chosen was too little. I think it needs to be pushed out. But here's one thing that I think is always lost in this, and then I'll let you go. I know you got some points to say, but the rule breakers are going to break the rules no matter what. If that was a quality company, I'm going to use that Colorado example. If that was a quality company, they would have not absolved their organization the next day and created and reincarnated another one. I think that what this could possibly do is raise the standards of what is required to be a professional truck driver in this country. And that is going to attract more people to this industry. Because I think like if you improve one area, you will improve others. It will bring, it's like, let's invest in more training for our drivers that are out there. Maybe it is like you're talking about that pathway to success in the training. Maybe there's some framework that'll be released out there. Like, hey, we have, you're going to start local Dallas market. You're going to get your stuff. Now the next level of training, we're going to start doing 500-mile overnight runs. We're going to do night training and everything else. Again, I want to just see an overall improvement on the emphasis of training.
I don't disagree with you. I think everyone would agree that training's it needs to be more of an emphasis here. Here's the thing. This industry's broken. The retention rates of truck drivers in some cases is 100% will leave you in the year, 120% for some carriers. You hire 12 people and 14 to 15 quit. We are talking about more meat for the machine. And this is about lowering the cost of transportation by getting people hooked in early who don't know the nature of this business. If you had a more safe situation, those cameras that they're requiring wouldn't be facing just outside. They would face the driver. But the lobbyists fought tooth and nail because truck drivers do not want driver-facing cameras. And the biggest distraction we all have is that supercomputer in your pocket. This is why when we talk about the desire for training, I agree with you. 160 hours is a joke. 1 month and you can drive an 80,000-pound machine. I don't think that's appropriate.
I don't care what age you are. I don't care what age you are. That's not appropriate.
And another 3 weeks on top of that. Here's the thing I'm going to share with you. Have you ever heard of a thing called the valuation of statistical life? Has that phrase ever been told to you?
I'm a blue-collar kid from northern Wisconsin. No, I've never heard that.
The Department of Transportation issues a thing called the Departmental Guidance on the Valuation of Statistical Life and Economic Analysis. It's where they assign the value of a human life for the decisions that they make. The cost of a human life per the DOT is $11.6 million. Now, we talk about the risks of driving a commercial vehicle. That Colorado case, again, it's fresh in people's minds. That's why I like to look at it, because we all know about it.
Yeah.
That trucking company did not have more than $1 million of liability insurance. Yeah. They killed 4 people, injured a bunch of others, and the only way that you're going to have anybody get compensated for the injuries that they sustained is if all of those other drivers carried really big policies for underinsured motorist coverage. So I get it. We want to have more people in this industry, but what this feels like to me, what it feels like to me is trying to outsource risk to the most unavailable people you should do it to. Not even getting to the lease purchase agreements that people do on the owner-operator side for small trucking companies. This is predatory. This is dangerous. I don't like it. I don't want it. And if we want to have more young people come in this business, we have to reform the business because it's broken. It is broken in some cases, not all. Enough. I'm being a little hyperbolic. But
God, you went full attorney there, man. That was like a closing argument. I'm sold after that. That was a closing argument right there. No, I'm just kidding. And we got some comments to catch up on. John Radvansky back in there. We're throwing more bodies into the mix without really addressing the issues as to why drivers are leaving the profession in the first place. Very true. Kyle McNaught, John Radvansky, preach. John's back in there. I lived in Germany. There's much more of an emphasis on driver training, not just learning how to steer and brake. Highways are better maintained and driving is actually taken more seriously and people actually follow the rules. I get that. We need more people following the rule. Anyways, Nicole Mitchell, median age of drivers. We weren't building from the bottom up. Drivers are retiring, but now with the minimum wage, a guy could go be a greeter at Walmart and be home with his family. I think companies are doing a good job at getting wages up. Let's see here. John's back at it. Pay is part of the issue and very important, but shippers need to do their part as well. Stop holding up drivers on the load. And oh, we are opening up a can of worms here on the loading and unloading process. Having restroom facilities available, basically treat them with respect. Yeah, I can't fucking argue with that at all.
Restrooms are so important. Bob Stanton is a great truck driver advocate, pushes on sleep apnea, talks about these bathrooms.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where you've driven for 500 miles and you get to the shipper's location and you need to use the restroom and they say, oh, no, this is employees only.
Yeah.
This is because it is hard to be a truck driver, and very few stakeholders really care about that driver experience, hence the turnover that we've seen.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's another, like, we could talk about this for a long time. And, I want to touch on one thing about what you were talking about with the cameras, forward facing the drivers, the supercomputer in our hand. As you know, I have family members who drive still, that one of them has a company that has that, but I want to ask you this. Do you want to be filmed while you sleep, Matt?
So this is a great question. Yeah. Typically, what happens with most of these drivers...
Unless you're into it. Sorry. That might be a thing.
I'll ask the director. She might have a comment. No, this is a good question. The most typical cameras that are forward, the driver facing, are generally the best application that I've heard is when there's a hard braking event. Taking a snapshot of what's happening during the moment of something catastrophic. It's very rare because the data is so massive to have constant feed of that driver. But the autonomous drivers, what you're going to have without automation, there is that camera monitoring exactly what the driver is doing. So we are being watched already. To think that your cell phone is a good example. Every 4 minutes, this machine is calling back to the corporate office saying, hey, here's what this person's doing. We are being surveilled everywhere we go.
No, for sure. But what I mean by that, though, is currently some companies stack cameras rolling even when the driver's not driving. That camera is in there while the driver is off duty, off clock. And that, I think, like...
Oh, yeah, again, I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like that.
Exactly. That's what I think. Like, again, it's like, I'm cool with the forward-facing cameras while they're driving. Emphasis on the word driving, not while they're parked.
When they're on duty driving, that's what I say. I mean, when you're on duty not driving, there's no need for that camera either. On duty driving, then I think there's a place. And I would say keeping it going all the time, it'd be hard. You drain your batteries out. You have to get a road mechanic to come out and jump you. You probably don't want that either. So it's one of these things, like, we want accountability. Yeah. We all want safer roads, but how you get there is really, really, really thorny, because there's a lot of people who like, I've had trucking companies that said, if we did driver facing cameras, we would quit. We don't quit. We're unionized. We don't want to have someone watching us. And this is the nature of what we see in the surveillance age.
I get it, dude. We could go on for hours. I know we're a couple minutes over. It was a great conversation today. And again, at the end of the day, I want you to be able to choose what you want to do with your life, whatever that is, whether I a person, and that goes for everything in life. It's none of my business at the end of the day, what you guys want to do with your lives. I just want you to be able to do that. I want you to be able to openly speak about your opinion and not have any of that diluted or shut down or censored or anything like that. I believe in freedom. I believe in liberty, and I want to see that preserved. I feel like, as somebody who, in my opinion, I have children, Matt, I know you have children. I want them to have the same life that I had growing up. I want them to continue to have that. I want you guys all to be able to live your lives the way that you see fit. That's my honest opinion on it. Again, I know that what we were talking about today, a lot of hot button issues, a lot of controversy that's around that. But, I feel like at the end of the day, I appreciate every single one of you who are openly supporting the content that we put out here every single week. And you guys are great. I know that we're not always going to agree, and that's fine. We shouldn't always agree on everything, but there should be the ability to have healthy conversation, because I feel like at the end of the day, we all really want the same things. We all want to be able to provide for our families and go home at the end of the night and see our kids. And I think that we can't lose focus of that.
I couldn't agree more. What I would say to everyone who's watched us is, I want you to continue to be passionate about your rights and about government and policy. This isn't my supply chain or Chris's supply chain. This is our supply chain. And every single one of us is bound by the same challenges the supply chain has. So the more you learn about these things, develop opinions, and formulate how you think the world should actually be, You should talk to your congressman about this. This is the advocacy that you get to have as a citizen. And I'm so excited to talk about law. Happy to be your armchair attorney, Chris. Happy to do it.
I appreciate it. And do not take any of this as legal advice, what Matt said.
Yeah, definitely. Please don't. This is a terrible, terrible idea if you do that.
Yeah. Don't do that. I appreciate you guys all so much. Thank you guys all so much for your support. Thank you to Bitfreighter, the preferred EDI partner of the Freight Coach. Check them out. Schedule that demo. Let them know that I sent you. They help keep the lights on around here and help us keep coming back every single week with all of my sponsors. I appreciate them all. I appreciate you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.